Will, you remember at the end of the 20th century, we heard from Francis Fukuyama that this is the end of history, that liberal democracy had triumphed and that it was going to basically spread throughout the world. And
yeah,
of course,
I remember that, Ed.
And of course it didn't happen. So the question is, what went wrong? Where was Fukuyama and those folks mistaken?
Well, I definitely remember what you're talking about, because I remember when we all thought that what the 21st century was going to be about were the debates inside liberal democracy. I mean, it wasn't the end of history exactly, but yes, the debates were going to be about things like environmentalism or economic freedom, and that's what the world conflicts were going to be about. But it sure doesn't look that way now that we're getting into the 21st century, because we're seeing a rise in a new nationalism, like the kind that Vladimir Putin's Russia is rolling out to justify its attempts to conquer its neighbors. And we're seeing a rise in religious fanaticism. Why, in the Middle East, you had this whole Arab Spring liberalization movement. And in country after country after country, what we saw was that once you opened up the society, the strongest political force were the religious fanatics. They were the Muslim Brotherhood. They were the most purist Islamicists.
They were Hamas in Gaza.
Hamas in Gaza, exactly. And so that's looking like that's what the 21st century is really going to be about, is the revival of religious mysticism and the doubling down on nationalism.
Yeah, I mean, look, here's, I think, what the situation is. The West went through an enlightenment, okay? Enlightenment meant that the supremacy of reason. Reason is the way you understand the nature of reality, and it should be your guide in life. Number two, the notion of individualism. The individual is the moral agent. The individual has a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and therefore government should be limited to protecting the individual. Now, granted, those principles were imperfectly realized in the West, but that was the moral foundation. The Islamic and Arab world never went through an enlightenment. So what they got, especially after World War II, is they got Western technology. They got Western admonitions about you should be democratic. But it just didn't work. You had strongman regimes everywhere from Libya to Egypt, Syria, Iran, Iraq. These regimes did not serve the people. They did not offer economic opportunity, a way to advance. People got very, very frustrated in those countries. And so then when they saw a chance to revolt, they revolted, but they didn't say, hey, let's look to the West and the Western model, because they didn't see that as a very good model, because they didn't have the moral foundations. Instead, they said, well, let's go back to, a caliphate. Let's go to the Muslim Brotherhood. Let's go to Hamas. Let's go to Hezbollah. Let's go to these authoritarian religious fanatic ideologies.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, Ed. I think what we're seeing here is the fact that in much of the world, having not experienced the Enlightenment, the people, or a lot of the people, are uncomfortable or downright hostile with the Enlightenment. And so you see this revival of religious fanaticism where they'll go and rape and kill and murder anyone and rob anyone who doesn't hold up to stand to their religious beliefs. And you see this new nationalism too. And what is nationalism at its root? It's tribalism. It's the idea that you live for the group. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. You live and die for the group. Well, that's just the old tribalist idea brought back as modern and nationalism. And so we're seeing all over the world countries that have never really been fully modern now doubling down on pre-modern, anti-modern ideas. And that seems to be the fight that we're going to see in the 21st century.
Yeah, Will, I mean, the West needs a good dose of its own Enlightenment philosophy. It needs to get back to its roots about reason, about individualism, about liberty, and it should wake up and understand that these are the values that the West should be exporting, so to speak, to the Arab world, the Muslim world, and everywhere else. This is the only way in the 21st century we're going to have peace and prosperity.
Yeah, I think that's really, these are the conflicts of the 21st century, and we need to be able to stand up for what the West really stands for at heart, and that is reason, individualism, achievement, freedom.
Exactly.